So this will be the first video, and it'll be a screenshot and a recording over the screenshot of the first posting in the contracts course. Let me take a couple of minutes to talk about the reference to the book in the postings. The book obviously is not available yet. I'm going to have to make a judgment call if it doesn't come in, or if we don't have very specific information that it's about to come in. I would imagine by the 1st of February, but I'll cross that bridge when I get there, and obviously keep you folks in the loop. I can present the course, and I feel very confident that I can present the course in a meaningful way to you without the book. So that's not a concern of mine. It's a very good book, and I'd rather that you have it to use, but if we don't get it, then we'll get by just fine without it. To the extent I'm making references to the book in the postings, you obviously cannot be held responsible for anything in the book if you don't have the book. So what you are responsible for is the material about contract law in the posting, and anything I may say in addition to the posting in these, let's call them screenshot videos. So I'm dictating this Sunday, January 24th. I'm hoping that by the end of this week, I'll have a better understanding of where we are with the book. We, the Paralegal Department, kindly ordered the book. I use it every semester. A snafu developed. I'm certainly not blaming the bookstore. This has been a difficult time to get some things accomplished, but we'll be fine. So I don't want anyone getting tense about it. We'll just do, and I'll do what we need to do. I will have a posting. I strike that. I will post a quiz. I know I could say that by this Friday, or on this Friday, the 29th. It will cover the material in the first two postings and in this video, and probably I will do a second video when I finish this one. So this video and the second one will be up today on January 24th. So it's going to be the material in the postings and the material in the video that will be the subject matter of a quiz that I'll be posting. It's going to be 5 points, so it's not going to be a huge evaluation event. Let's get into the material. So the first part of the course is just introductory material. And you'll see that I have that I followed the chapter outlines, nature and terminology. By the way, there's nothing special about how the material is presented. The way the material is presented in the book, or how it's going to be presented if we don't have the book, is how this material was presented to me many years ago as a first-year law student when I took a course in contract law. So you begin with nature and terminology. And I like the definition of, general definition of a contract as a legally binding agreement between two or more parties who agree to perform or to refrain from performing, meaning we won't perform some act now or in the future. So the question that's kind of begged, though, is what constitutes a valid contract, and we're going to spend a lot of time in the course examining the requirements of a valid contract, but we can certainly identify them in a general way right now. And the four elements that I've set forth are agreement, consideration, contractual capacity, and legality. And we will treat each one of these topics in greater depth as we go along. But let's say a few things about them now. And we can start with agreement. Without an agreement, we don't have a contract. That's going to raise a possible question when we consider, and I scroll down to quasi-contracts, meaning that sometimes there could be a recovery in a lawsuit where there's no agreement. But more of that a little bit later in this video. Let's go back up. We've got agreement. We then have consideration, which we could call bargain for exchange of legal value. And I like the thought that it can be thought of as the motivation why parties enter into a contract. You go to the hot dog stand and you get 2 hot dogs in a small Coke for $5.50. The consideration is your $5.50, and the hot dog vendor's consideration for you is the 2 hot dogs in a small Coke. Typically, there's consideration because otherwise people aren't going to be motivated to enter into an agreement. We will run into some problems about consideration when we get to that chapter. In other words, where there may be no consideration, possibly because I agreed to do something when I already had a legal obligation to do it for you, and I'm simply trying to extract more money, and there may be no consideration to support your promise to pay me more money if all I gave you in return was what I was already legally obligated to do. But more of that later. Contractual capacity. And again, even when we get there, we don't have to spend an awful lot of time on that, as I put the bar as low. If the person is at least 18 years of age, not mentally incompetent, and not so intoxicated that they don't know what they're doing, that person has the capacity to enter into a contract. We'll take a little bit of a closer look at that later, but I think it's safe to say that everybody who's watching this video and the person who's dictating this screenshot recording is at least 18 years of age. I can assure you that I am. I've had some bad days, but I'm not mentally incompetent. And I can tell you that at 12:11 p.m. on January 24th, I've been drinking some caffeine, but I clearly don't have any kind of intoxication to indicate I don't know what I'm doing. I've known some people who become intoxicated by their ego, but that's sort of a figure of speech, and that's not the kind of intoxication we're talking about. Legality. And before there's a contract that's valid, we need to make certain that it's a legal contract. I just point out for the sign of the times an interesting contrast. In New York State, I think outside the area of medical marijuana, it's not legal for people under any setting to agree to sell and buy marijuana. But I could get in my car. I don't have any motivation to do this, by the way, today, to drive to Massachusetts and get there before sunfall and buy marijuana at a legalized marijuana outlet. And so it's interesting that there may be differences in legality just based upon the state that we're in. When we talk about legality, I'm going to be more concerned about practical aspects of it, and that's going to get us into something called a covenant not to compete, anti-competition agreements, which I find to be interesting and very necessary in certain contracts. We'll talk about that when we get down to the material on legality. What I also want to point out is that we can have different, or all, better said, all of the 4 requirements of a valid contract, but we may have a problem. And what would be a problem? Well, all of the 4 elements are there, but fraud was used to induce a person to enter into the contract. So we'll be talking about those kinds of situations later in the course. Also, some contracts need a proper form, which is to say they need to be in a signed writing to be enforceable, and that comes under that, statute of frauds. Just by way of example, if you wanted to purchase a house in Buffalo, before the agreement could be enforceable, you as purchaser and the person selling the house, the seller, would have to have a written contract that both of you sign. I'm going to jump over types of contracts right now, and I want you to read it. It's just a basic definition of bilateral or unilateral contract. I think you can kind of put that together yourself. Where I want to spend a little bit of time, and just shut down there, is quasi-contracts. And the question becomes here, what happens if there's no agreement? In other words, we can run into situations where one person provides something of tangible value to another person, and it occurs without an agreement. One example I have in the outline is a physician encounters an unconscious person on the side of the road and renders medical aid to save the person's life. Obviously, the physician and the unconscious person did not have an agreement before the physician rendered assistance to the unconscious person. Let me give you two other examples, far more mundane. One winter, my neighbor in Buffalo purchased a new snowblower, and he very thoughtfully not only would use the snowblower on his property, but he would actually clear the walk out in my house, the front of the house, and the bottom of the driveway. There wasn't a lot of sidewalk, and there wasn't a lot at the bottom of the driveway, but when there was a lot of snow, I was so grateful that he did it. And I might add that when the season ended, I favored him with a bottle of Jameson whiskey because I knew that was a preference he had. But if he had, it seems to me, submitted a bill at the end of the season for snow removal, it would have been a bill submitted without an agreement. And the question would be, would I have to pay it? The other example I would put in, which actually happened once, I had a fellow painting in the interior of my house when I was out of town for some time, and he showed up one morning to paint, and he noticed in the middle of January or early in January that the furnace was out. He couldn't get a hold of me. I was somewhere in Florida. It wasn't, I guess I didn't have my cell phone. But in any event, he was one of these guys who could fix anything, and he went and he figured out how to fix the furnace. It needed a thermocoupler or something like that. Thermocoupler, I have no idea. But he fixed the furnace for me. So in those three examples, the doctor rendering aid to the unconscious person, my neighbor snow blowing my sidewalk and driveway, and the guy, the painter, fixing the furnace. And in the first example, the unconscious person received something of tangible value. In the other two examples, I received something of tangible value. And so the question becomes, in these instances, should there be compensation? And I'm at the end of this 15-minute segment, so I'll pick up with the answer to this question in the second